This podcast is made possible by VersaPay.
Hello, this is Chip Zint, CFO of Deluxe, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 877.
AssetMark is ready for, and what we are staffed properly. Our team is motivated properly. We have the highest client satisfaction scores we've ever had because we have been so focused on making sure our clients know where they are. And so for the company, we are looking for more M&A opportunities. We are sitting on the cash that we want to go spend to keep growing that way. But we're also really excited about where we are positioned competitively. So when, let's say, the worm turns, or whatever the phrase is that you're going to have, we're going to be right there to grab more market share.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Gary Zyla, CFO of AssetMark. It was the type of CFO position that Gary Zyla would likely not have been recruited for had he been looking outside of his company. That's not to say Zyla's resume didn't have some solid CFO prerequisites. But the leadership challenge Zyla was about to take on was less about capital management and more about establishing the business functions required to run a business day to day. In 2011, Zyla was appointed CFO of a newly formed company subsidiary, a business that would be sold to private equity investors only 2 years later in 2013, and yet again in 2016. Besides the two ownership transactions, Zyla's CFO career now includes an IPO in 2019 and 6 different acquisitions within the last 7 years. Not bad for a finance leader who has yet to look outside his company for opportunities. That story and much more after this. When your accounts receivable automation focuses only on back office tasks, you forget the most important stakeholder, your customers. VersaPay gives you all the tools you need to automate those tasks, plus the collaboration tools to take on everything that automation alone simply can't. This doesn't just increase efficiencies and accelerate cash flow, but also creates a dramatically improved experience for your customers. And as the economy tightens, can you really afford to risk losing customers over an invoice to cash process they find frustrating? With VersaPay, clients typically achieve 50% less time managing receivables, 25% faster payments, 30% fewer past due invoices, and 81% customer portal adoption. Learn more about VersaPay's collaborative AR, ERP payments, and cash application solutions at versapay.com/CFO. Hello, we're speaking with Gary Zyla, CFO of AssetMark. Gary, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So, Gary, we always begin asking our guests to look back for us and try to identify some of the experiences they feel, rewarded them with some leadership insight or expertise that allowed them to step into the CFO role. What would come to mind for you?
So there's a few memories I have, a few things that really defined like my career path when I look back, and everyone's is going to be different, right? When I came out of college, I came out in upstate New York, state school out of New York as an actuary, working in the city, and I got promoted within a few years to a manager role, and I realized what I was good at was kind of managing folks and kind of focusing on the objectives of what the company was doing. What I was not good at, Jack, was those actuarial exams. A lot smarter people than me can take those actuarial exams, and that was not my thing. And it was an interesting wake-up call for me. I don't know if you call it a failure, but a sort of like I need to reset. I need to figure out what my career path is. I need to build off my strengths and not just sort of like the path I'm on. And so that was one of my first defining moments. And shortly after that, I got out of the actuarial field. I went to school to get my MBA specifically because I saw in the finance world, there was just a lot more ability for me to kind of really get engaged in the whole business, from the front end, the sales, the product development, to the back end, where you're kind of managing, the resources of the company. I can think of two other things as well. In 2008, I was working for an insurance company out of Richmond, Virginia. It was a spinoff from GE, big insurer that did life insurance and long-term care. And I was the head of their capital management. And so it's kind of a vertical within a large insurance company. So not yet, in a CFO role, no longer in an actuarial role, but managing capital. And in 2008, of course, there were, that's 15 years ago now. So maybe many people don't remember. It was insane, the collapse of so many companies' balance sheets. My insurance company was suffering there as well. And I found there in finance, we were in the middle of this maelstrom, and it was amazing learning experience to kind of see what needed to be done quickly, but also, honestly, Jack, at that stressful moment, I never had encountered such a stressful moment when you had to lean back and go, well, what are your core values? Are you going to be transparent? Are you going to be honest? Are you going to be kind? Are you going to be optimistic? Like, who are you working with around you? It was so eye-opening to really be able to see what it means to work with people who have good core values, because in those stressful moments, as you're trying to save the company or really direct the company, it really meant a lot. And so I really look back to that time now very fondly. I mean, it really did teach me something,
I know there's another experience you want to share, but I just was hoping you could give us a little more detail on your MBA chapter, because as you said, you set a new course with it, and I think you did it the right way and maybe a little differently from some of the finance leaders who have had similar chapters of using the MBA to sort of set a new course. You did it, and you were able to open a new chapter. Can you tell us a little more about that?
I went to Maryland University at night school. So I had taken a job in corporate finance for an small insurance company in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, I went for 3 years. I took night classes at Maryland to get my MBA with the specific focus that was going to open up doors for me. Networking helps a little bit, and I met some folks there and some friends I've kept in touch with, but it wasn't professionally networking. That didn't work out, but it did open up doors for me, and specifically that door to this in GE spinoff insurance company. Right? After I came out with my MBA, and the MBA teaches you a number of great things. It did teach a lot of strategy classes. It taught me negotiation classes. It taught me some fundamentals of corporate finance, but it was more the sort of overall gestalt of the whole thing, I guess, if you will, that opened up those doors. And from that, I went straight into a pretty senior role. I don't say it, a high level role at this insurance company, and that helped accelerate within a few years to where I was just talking about in 2008.
And the the GE spinoff? Is that Genworth Financial, or is that a rebranding? Or so that was Genworth.
Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. Genworth Financial. Yeah, exactly.
And you were there, and you made a 7-year investment at Genworth, where, as you described, in the middle of that 7 years, we have the financial crisis.
So I have to say, when the economic downturn. That period in 2008, and that was the point in my career where I was able to really step up and engage like the broad company, right? Literally, you're sitting with, like I said, that the heads of departments, that finance. Sometimes, if you're in the back office, you're not going to be talking to a lot. But again, sales and rethinking about how you're going to rejigger your sales team. You're talking to product development teams. You're talking to in the insurance company, you have a lot of legal entity structures that you got to play with, and you've got to meet with the lawyers continuously about what's going on with these different legal entity structures that you're creating. Coming out of that, and this is those opportunities many people have in their career. I believe I was lucky enough. I created a lot of trust with the folks who I worked with, right? I was there, I was present in 2008. We performed well, we made it through. And all of us who were working together, you had this trust. I don't know how else to say it, right? You built, you bring your competence to work every day. But what you need to do is inspire trust in people and also kind of inspire people. And I'm more gregarious than or garrulous than most finance people. I talk a lot and whatnot. And so I believe I found a bit of a niche after that. Shortly after that, I raised my hand to be a divisional CFO of a small business that Genworth owned in California called AssetMark. And I believe it was because of the prior experiences, that trust, that they were like, all right, you've never actually been a CFO. It's a very broad role. You've been kind of this kind of vertical managing capital. We're going to take a leap of faith on you, right? I don't know if I could have gotten that job leaving Genworth to go somewhere else, because people will look at my resume and say, you don't really have that experience yet, So, and a third real pivotal moment in my career, which is almost what you were getting to just now, Jack. In 2013, after I came out to California to be this divisional CFO, Genworth decided to sell the business. And again, there was another opportunity I wasn't expecting to come along, where I was part of the sale of this business. And suddenly, once sold to private equity, I was the CFO of this 350-person privately held business. And we had no payroll system. We had no treasury system. We had no benefits, because that all left at the old company, right? We had to set up our own finance structure going forward. The PE folks had all new visions about what we were going to build. And again, it's that opportunity, right? And I was surrounded by, I had great people working with me. I had a great boss working for me. So, it's this opportunity there. But through that opportunity, that's a transformative change. That was about 10 years ago now, right? Where I was given that opportunity, and luck helps a lot. You gotta be lucky, truly, right? You gotta be fortunate. You gotta take advantage of what's in front of you.
You already have your CFO stripe when the private equity company acquires you, and they got to know you during that period, that interim period. At the same time, one would think you're in the, put in the hot seat for a little while.
Yeah, no, I think so. And look, I firmly believe you got to walk through life. You got to minimize the stress in your life, right? Stress is, you put stress upon yourself, right? Some people, you talk to my kids, you counsel people, and they're like, oh, that person's stressing me. I'm like, no, nobody else is stressing you. You control the stress you feel, right? And you gotta figure out how to meditate through that and whatnot. But no, I completely agree, Jack. The new owners, they had very clear objectives. They were very clear with me about what they were trying to get to, and we worked together, right, to get to that. And it was a very exciting time. I guess you could, stressful. There was a lot of work to be done to make sure we stood the company up properly, right? Because that's exactly what we had to do. We had to stand it up pretty quickly on its own. But it's a great company. I had great people here, and so my job wasn't that hard. But I needed to make sure that we covered everything, right? Made sure everybody got paid, right? And all these things you take for granted.
Well, and just so the list clue the listeners in a little more, it's 11 years later. You're still CFO of AssetMark. You're a executive vice president as well. The company, I don't know how many lives it's led. I know it's publicly traded today, so there was a milestone along the way. But let's begin by asking you about AssetMark. Tell us about AssetMark. What is this company about? What are its offerings?
No, it's a great company. Look, so AssetMark is a service provider to financial advisors in the country. So about 35% of Americans use a financial advisor to help manage their money, right? There's about 300,000 financial advisors in this country. And many of them, every single one of them, needs basically a platform to invest their clients' money. And some of them are in closed shops, like they'll do it every Jones for your financial advice and whatnot. But many of them are what they call independent. And they get to choose what platform they use. And they could use a big name like a Fidelity or Charles Schwab, or they could use a smaller name like AssetMark. And we believe we provide three really important things for them. We provide an open architecture technology that gives them a lot of flexibility in their investment choices. We believe we provide them an excellent curated investment portfolio. Basically, it helps the financial advisor narrow down the complicated world of where to put money. And we do that curating of the investment solutions. And then the third thing is we provide white glove service to these financial advisors. All these financial advisors we work with are basically small business. So we're a B2B. We're the larger B. We work with these smaller Bs, these small financial advisor offices, mom and pop shops, maybe 3 or 4 advisors in an office, maybe the nephews working the front desk and the niece is handling the calls, whatever, right? Imagine a small office. They need support. They need support building websites. They need support taking calls from clients about account changes. They need support on the technology and then marketing and customer segmentation. We provide all these services to the financial advisor with the one goal, our one mission, that we make a difference in their lives so that they can make a difference in the lives of the investor. And we have about 8,000 advisors that work with our platform. We're a little bit shy of $100 billion of assets on our platform. And we believe it's been a winning formula for many, many years. The company's about 25 years old. And so it's founded by a few guys out of Berkeley 25 years ago. Now we're a publicly traded company with about, we're going to be targeting some over $600 million of revenue this year.
Can we maybe have just a brief history since you stepped into the CFO office there 11 years ago? Some of the milestones, and as we indicated, there was the IPO clearly, but you arrive, it's owned by private equity. This company's gone through quite a few chapters, no doubt. But what would you highlight for us? And I know there's been acquisitions recently, and I don't know if there were others along the way. Can you give us some of the transaction highlights, perhaps?
Sure, absolutely. So, like we said earlier, I came here as a divisional CFO in 2011. We were a small subsidiary of a very large insurance company. So in 2013, we spun off, did a sale to private equity, took ourselves private. We kind of huddled together, created the new strategy that we were going to go forward with. And private equity has a playbook. They have it's neither good or bad. It's just their playbook, right? They're going to fix up the company, and they're going to look to then exit at some point. Generally, 3 to 7 years is for private equity. They come in to try to get out. And that was exactly how it worked. In about 3.5 years, they felt comfortable, and it was time for them to exit. And we had a really good outcome. A foreign purchaser, a company called Watai out of Nanjing, China. They were the top bidder in 2016. And it was a great outcome for the original private equity. They about 4.5 times they made on their return, which was awesome. Watai came in, and they in 2016, and they set us up almost exactly the same way. While they are a public company and listed on the Hong Kong Exchange, they held us in a private entity type structure. And so not much operationally changed for AssetMark other than who was on our board. But for us in finance and some of the other groups, we certainly had to make sure we addressed the new owners' focus and their desires, right? They were looking for what kind of synergies could we have across the companies, what kind of cross-sell opportunities, if you will. But they were much more focused on what's the path to an IPO. And so we worked with them and we worked within finance and for the broader company to make sure the company was prepared for an IPO, because that takes a long time, right? You have a lot of controls you need to set up, a lot of insurance you need to make sure it's set up, et cetera, and whatnot. And so in 2019, so 3 years again later, that's when, in 2018, we had our kickoff for the IPO. And we made a whole bunch of mistakes along the way, I assure you, but by July 2019, we were able to IPO. And so now along the way, so we had the sale in 2016, then the IPO in 2019. Along the way, AssetMark was also doing M&A. And so in these past 7 years, we've made 6 acquisitions or so. And we think of acquisitions 2 ways. One is sort of a consolidation, buying companies like us that are smaller that we can consolidate into our business. And then other ones that are capability plays, where we're going out to find and specifically technology capabilities. We purchased a company called Voyant out of Texas 2 years ago, and they have a wonderful financial planning software. That was a hole in our offering, right? And so we have a great website and a great platform for our financial advisors, but to have a really awesome financial planning software integrated into our system, that was a big hole that we had, and we were really excited about the Voyant acquisition. So along the way, almost every year, I can either we were buying something or we were flipping ourselves in some way or whatnot. But that's part of the process. And part of the maturity of an organization is to be able to do that at the high level, while the rest of the company is focused on their key mission, right? And so we have always been focused on making sure the financial advisor is taken care of, like they are our client, and so whatever noise that we're creating, that corporate's creating by either buying or selling, right? We got to also make sure that a lot of the finance team is focused on making sure the company is running smoothly. We use a phrase, eliminating friction. We want to eliminate friction from our sales or our product folks, right? We don't want them worrying about the company car and when that has to be renewed. We want to be on top of that. We don't want their corporate credit cards to be fritzing out on them. We also want them to obsess about their budget. We need to solve the budget for them and how they can pay for what they need. And that friction, if you can eliminate that friction, they'll move much more smoothly. It's just like a question of mind share.
Is that in eliminating friction? I think it's a good way of looking at it. Eliminating friction, does that sometimes mean better educating the sales force or better educating parts of the organization with numbers to allow them to see or understand better why a particular deal might not be structured favorably or what have you? Is there a way that finance is supplying those numbers to better educate and remove the friction that can happen when people perhaps do deals that are not successful?
That's a great question, Jack, and absolutely. And one of the things that when we go back 10 years ago, one of the issues finance saw in the business was that different groups were running around with different numbers, and it was and the numbers become like truths, right? And so someone's running around thinking that this product is creating this sort of profitability, and they can discount it, or the growth rate, if you look at these numbers, is 15%, and another group thinks it's 5%. And they're honest, they're both being honest about the numbers they're looking at. It's just they're just looking at different numbers. And so one of the things we set up years ago, and is still really core to my finance team, is our business intelligence team, we call it, where they are the source of truth for almost all numbers. How do you look at growth rates? A key number in our industry is called a retention rate. How many the assets that are on the platform, how many are going to be here a year from now? There's a lot of different ways to do that ratio. But if you could create that one truth, right, about what that number is, and educate everybody on how to think about that, conversations are a lot easier. And then the next step beyond that is, I think, what you were saying, Jack. How do you regularly have discussions with sales folks, product folks, or IT folks about these numbers? Let them understand. And we've created, sometimes you get lost in so much data you're creating, but we try to create useful dashboards. We use tools like Power BI, particularly at AssetMark. You could use Tableau. There are other types of tools where you can take the data that we're looking at, create a good visual of it, and share it with 100 people in your company. or have them easily bring it up, right? Because then they can see what that data is. So that is a huge part of what our finance team does try to do. So it's a great question.
You used the phrase your BI team, and I'm wondering if that you actually have a team. They know who they are. They're part of the BI team, and if so, do you think your BI team is structured differently than other industries or sectors? Do you structure that team or task them with certain responsibilities that maybe traditional finance organizations might not? But over time, as you have grown to understand the customers that you serve and the salespeople in the organization, whatever it might be, you've structured it in such a way or tasked them differently. No? Or what would you tell us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, our business intelligence team is a very distinct team. So, the finance team I oversee, it's fun and it's broad, right? We have you have business intelligence. I have investor relations, corporate development, communications, and PR are part of our finance team, which is somewhat unusual sometimes. You have FP&A, of course, and you have controllership. But business intelligence is amazing. And I think in many companies, depending on the type of company you are, you could drop business intelligence in a couple different areas. It could sit in IT. I wouldn't recommend it, but it could sit in IT because it's very IT focused because you got to be able to process data. It could sit in sales because oftentimes business intelligence is so focused on predictive metrics and whatnot for sales. It could sit in a strategy group if you had a separate strategy group. I think in our company, and I'm lucky, finance is very strategic. Obviously, while we're talking, it's very, very strategically based. And so it really fits well here. Our leader of BI, she has balances this beautiful balance between being able to talk IT, which I cannot. So I don't know what she's talking about. She can talk that IT, but she can also talk the business and talk with our business lead, our sales leaders, et cetera, on what they're looking for. And the team now is about 7 or 8, by 50-person finance team for scale. My finance team is about 50 people. The VI team itself is about 7 folks, and they not only collect the data and make sure they're the source of truth. Like I said, they're what goes in our 10K, right? In terms of all our statistical numbers. They also they take that data and they actually do compensation based off of it. So they handle the compensation for our sales team, and so they're the source of truth for our sales team for a very important thing, what they're getting paid. So they are essential, and I think on my particular team, it all works well together. They feed in, they take data from controllership, obviously, and they give data to controllership for like I said, our SEC filings. They work with our FP&A team who does our forecasting and our modeling. And they work actually with our communications team. So when our communications team wants to go out and talk about our company, they need that type of data from them. And of course, they work with our front end business all the time in terms of trying to find predictive.
So the BI team is having a meeting down the hall from Gary, and Gary walks in, swings open the door. What is the team members thinking? What are they like? Oh no, Gary's going to ask us about this. What are they thinking? And maybe it's not a no. Maybe it's a hooray.
So I hope it's not. I hope it's not an oh no. That'd be terrible. I hope it's like, yay, there's Gary. Yeah. But I think, I think one of the things we try to do with the BI team or focused on is they are excellent at collecting data from multiple platforms that we have, pulling it together into and making it accurate, right? So you can pull it all together. That is they're excellent at. They're excellent creating some reports. I believe what I lately have been asking them to do more of is sort of the analytic work. Make sure you're not just creating data, but kind of delivering the analytics so people can make good strategic decisions. And we've done that over time. I mean, some of my best memories or my most fundamental things about how finance can be strategic come from that, right? I could come up with a number of stories about that, but the stories about how, you know, those strategic moments, I guess that's the phrase you use, those come from those aha moments when you're drilling through the data and you're not even sure what you're looking for, but suddenly you see, oh my gosh, this is what my business does. And so I think when I come through the door, I hope they're happy, but they probably will hear me asking them to, figure out how to spend less time on collecting the data and more time on looking through the data and having sit downs with our leadership about
this company today, roughly 900 employees, or is it a little larger? I know you've done some acquisitions, so.
Yeah, so we just closed an acquisition called Adhesion in December. A company that's a little like us, a little smaller, but they do bring capability where they actually can service a slightly different type of financial advisor than our core business, which is really awesome. But we are just under 1,000 employees now, so 980 or so.
We speak to a lot of tech sector CFOs that the environment certainly is in flux, we believe, but at the same time, hiring was very challenging. Turn back the clock during COVID. What did you experience over COVID as far as your people and hiring concerns?
Yeah, so it was interesting. One thing is that we do an annual employee engagement survey to kind of gauge how our employees are. 2020 was our highest scoring year ever. And given, wow, 2020, like what a disruptive year. And our employees were as engaged and happy with us as ever. And part of it was because we did approach in 2020, our first focus was taking care of the employees, figuring out a way immediately for them to work at home in comfort, make it possible, get whatever technology needed there, whatever legal issues we have, because we are a financial services company. How do you accommodate that? And also, we didn't have to downsize in 2020. When the market crashed, it does impact our revenue directly. Our revenue is directly linked to the value of the assets on our platform. And so, but we were able to manage through that, which has always been one of our key tenets, that we're not going to get ahead of ourselves in terms of our growth. We are going to make sure we're never going to have to take that step back. And, we never have had to yet. Hiring was what we found in 2020 and 2021. We had to accommodate remote work in a way that we never thought we did before, right? And partly because the office wasn't open, but also just to find employees. We are here in the Bay Area here. A lot of technology companies hired a lot of people in 2020 and 2021, and so now about 30% of our company is remote, and that's the level we want. We don't really want to go more than that, but that number was much lower before 2020. And so one of the ways we accommodated bringing in talent was that over the past few years. I think the corner has turned a little bit now in the current environment. I mean, you hear about so many of the tech companies downsizing, 5, 6, 7% of their staff, which is enormous and somewhat shocking, right? We plan to continue this sort of steady growth. We added about 100 people in 2022. We're going to plan to continue that sort of steady growth, and not try to get ahead of ourselves. But I do believe we're going to find the next year and a half a little more accommodating for companies to find talent, because I think there's going to be a bit of a shakeup, particularly here in the West Coast in the technology.
So we're up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment question. This is where we ask you just to share a moment of insight that you've experienced during the course of your finance career. And again, we're just looking for a story, some moment of insight that you had that allowed you to pursue an opportunity, avoid a risk, whatever it may have been, but your lines of sight as a finance leader allowed you to see something. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Let me go back to what I was talking about earlier about BI and the importance of, in finance, taking that data that we are working with all the time and really delivering something to our team. So let me go back in time. This has got to be about 6 or 7 years ago now. It's well before our BI team was where it was. The finance team was much smaller. And my right hand, my head of FP&A, he and I were looking at our sales data. So our sales team was trying to figure out how to segment their clients, at the financial advisors they work with. And we had a fairly traditional, well, you have some large ones and some small ones. And we started looking at the data of our financial advisors. Well, at the time, maybe it was about 5,000. The company was a bit smaller back then. Finance team was smaller. And we realized that we could take the buckets that we already had, and based on not just the size meaning the assets that the advisor is managing, but also the production, which is kind of like the annual sales of that advisor. And then you also say, when is that production happening? Is it happening like in lumps or regularly? And we started bifurcating our client base from those, say, 2 or 3 buckets we had to maybe, let's call it 9 or 12 buckets. And we started thinking about, all right, this bucket, they're small, but they've grown a lot in the past 6 months, but they've stopped. Like, what's a good name for that one? Like, what was that guy? That guy's small. He liked us for a little bit, really excited, but stopped. And he was a large one that we all consider large. They haven't done anything like in a year and a half. They've just been sitting on the large. What do you call that one? And here's a medium-sized one that is like a rocket. This guy was nothing about a year and a half ago. Why is this guy a rocket? And so it was that analysis when we sat down with the sales team, when we put this up, and I got to give all the credit to my FP&A guy because he did all the hard work on this. But when we as finance sat down with the sales team and said, this is how we were looking at your data. And they were like, wow. And they wound up changing how they went to market, how they marketed to their advisors, how they segmented them in our Salesforce application, how they thought about how often am I call this one versus how often am I going to call that one. It was a really exciting moment for me and my finance team, because we sat back and like a few months later, we started seeing documents about how they're going to attack certain segments of their clients, and they were using the actual words we put in front of them, like rocket or whatnot. And we were like, that's really gratifying. And that was amazing. And so, again, that was 6, 7 years ago. The company's grown a lot then, but part of that growth is, if we keep doing more of that, and there are more examples of that, but we keep doing more of that, whether it's FP&A or the BI team, or even our communications team, there's different groups that we have in finance who can all look at the business in a way that I don't think, the front end folks kind of had the time to, right? You're on sales, you're out there killing it every day. You're calling people, 30 people a day. You're not sitting there, musing about, the predictive data of the type of client you have. And that's where we can come in. And because we both have the skills looking at data, that's what we do all day long. But if you can marry that with the understanding of the business, which is what we had, an example I was saying to you, it was really exciting, Jack. And it really, I think, changed how my argument for the AssetMark of where we need to invest in terms of data analytics.
Hello and welcome to 60-Second Stories from CFO Thought Leader. During the early years of his finance career, Dan Fletcher was accustomed to being known as the executive from somewhere else. When Fletcher joined the asset management team at Allstate Investments, he was known as the auditor from Pricewaterhouse. And when Fletcher landed inside an interim management role as a private equity advisor, he was known as the former investor turned operator. Fletcher's early career journey is noteworthy, not necessarily because he achieved the finance triad of auditor, investor, and operator, but because of the speed at which he was able to pivot from one realm to the next. According to Fletcher, such pivots require careful relationship building, and as Fletcher explains, people were willing to bet on me. You'll hear that story and much more on episode number 872 of CFO Thought Leader featuring CFO Dan Fletcher of Planful. Remember, the future of finance is listening.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as the mentoring round, which is where we once more begin by asking you to look back for us And we want to go back to that moment in time when you got your first CFO assignment to join this outfit. Um, and the first 30 or 60 days, what if you could go back and just give yourself a little piece of advice? You think back who you were then, what was, your concerns and time. What is the piece of advice you'd give that person?
So, I think it'd be two things. One, um, there's a clarity of thought. I learned this out along the way. To be able to give your team or your peers, like the other executive, like a clarity of thought about what you're doing and what you're looking at. And specifically if I'm managing my finance team, a clarity as to where are we going? Like, what are we trying to do right now? Where are we going to be in 12 months? And it may change. Clarity doesn't mean you have to be right all the time. It means right now, I know why we're doing what we're doing. And you do too. And early on in your career, you focus a lot about the individual work you can do. I was a good individual contributor. That's why I got promoted to being a manager, because people trusted me. Once you're a manager, one of the things, or a leader, that clarity, and I've found that with the people who I've followed, the ones that can really give you that it's both motivating and as well as it makes things move better. I mean, you actually get more done because you have this clarity of thought. So that'd be the first thing that pops in my head.
Nice. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. We're wondering, Gary, if you have a personal habit or part of a daily routine that you're known for, something, this might be something a family member would know about you, something that you've done regularly over time, something you're known for, sets you apart from others of your peers, perhaps. Anything?
Oh wow, that's a tough one, Jack. Look, I think what I get a lot of feedback on is I and it just sounds almost bragging. I don't mean it to be. People tell me, for a finance person, I have quite a sense of humor, or quite a way about me, and I do. I do enjoy the spotlight. I do enjoy making people laugh. I do enjoy being funny. It is. It has helped me in my career, and I don't think you have to be. You don't have to be like over the top and a clown or whatnot. I do think you got to be genuine. I do think anybody in a leadership role, you have to be genuine. Yeah, and what I found is my way of being genuine is being really open about my personal life, and that the cringing stories people will hear from me about what's going on in my personal life, because whatever, I sort of have a whatever approach to it. Yeah, you're going to like me or not. I assume you'll learn to like me, but whatever, right? But other people have other ways they approach it. But as long as you're genuine, people want to follow genuine people. They want to follow people that it doesn't have to be a particular type, and so I don't know if I have a thing that I do. I drink Diet Coke 24/7, and so that's the thing people tease me about. I have a refrigerator here in my office that is only filled with Diet Coke, and when people come in, I'm like, "Do you want a Diet Coke?" So that's a little quirky thing, but in terms of what I think people would talk about me, I do try to keep things very humorous. I do believe that what we do is serious, but it's not life and death. And you've got to be able to enjoy work. Like, we're here most of our day. We've got to be able to enjoy work. And so hopefully that gives a little color.
Wonder whether you have a book you'd like to recommend to us. Doesn't have to be a business book. Maybe it's something you escape with.
Personally, a poem that has always spoke to me is the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling. I have it up in my house. I often have it up. I don't have it right now in my office. It is a poem that tries to put at incredible heights, like what it means to be, a good person or successful or whatnot. And I think it's neat. I personally have a philosophy: you aspire to be more than what you can be. Right? I'm a huge baseball fan, and I remember having a debate with somebody. Do you aspire to always hit 400? In baseball, nobody can hit 400 batting average. But that's the golden thing. Do you aspire to do that? or do you aspire to hit 300? Which a lot of folks can, but it's still great, right? And so my personality, I would always aspire to 400. I don't mind failing every time. I know I'm going to fail, but that's what I aspire to, as opposed to aspiring to 300. So I love that poem, If. It has that same sense to me, that it's impossible standards, but why wouldn't you aspire to that impossible standard? In terms of other books, there's a book called The Tao of Pooh, and I'm raised in the West here, but the Tao of Pooh captures both the Pooh Bear story, the Pooh Bear characters, explaining a philosophy of life that allows you to kind of take life as it gives it to you, and not be too stressed out and so it's an older book. I think it was a book from about 50 years ago now, and so maybe it's not for the younger crowd, but I always found that a comforting book to read.
And we're up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally over the next 12 months. We'd like to know what your priorities are as CFO of AssetMark.
Well, and this has been great. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, Jack. This has really been really fun. So look, the way I think about the next this upcoming year, next 12 months, we have spent AssetMark the past 2 years or plus in this sort of pandemic environment, kind of preparing for our company for when stuff gets effectively back to normal. And in our business, what's been crazy over the past 18 months has been the equity markets, has been the bond markets. Cash has been sitting on the side. People are terrified about investing in the equity markets right now. And so we have seen at AssetMark a slowdown of those new money coming in. Still, we are growing and we feel great about that. And we feel great about where we are competitively. But it's noticeable. Everybody's putting more money into cash. You get a higher interest rate without the risk in the market. At some point, that will turn. It always does. Markets always come back. Things will settle down. And what AssetMark is ready for, and what we've been spending the past 2 years, we are ready for this. We're ready. We are staffed properly. Our team is motivated properly. We have the highest client satisfaction scores we've ever had, because we have been so focused on making sure our clients know where they are. And so for the company, we are excited about this coming new year. We are looking for more M&A opportunities. We are sitting on the cash that we want to go spend to keep growing that way. But we're also really excited about where we are positioned competitively. So when, let's say, the worm turns, or whatever the phrase is that you're going to have, we're going to be right there to grab more market share. And we're really excited.
Gary Zyla, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks a lot, Jack. Appreciate it. You have a good day.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.